I don't know about you, but I have several heavy big machines that are tucked away somewhere in my workshop, and when I need to use them, I'd rather not use them because of all the time it takes to bring them out, set them up, well, use them, that's the fun part, but then you need to disassemble them and put them away somewhere again, and yeah, it's not just fun. But in this video I plan to solve that by making some really cool cabinets with a lot of storage in them that I can place my machines on. And that way I can just roll out the cabinets with the machines on them when I need to use them, and then just roll them back to wherever they were. And the really cool thing about these cabinets are that they are adjusted so that the machine bed will be in the same height as my workbench. That will essentially turn my workbench into a huge outfeed table. And for this build I've created some really cool interactive plans that I just need to enter the machine size in, and the cabinet size will update itself. And down in the description you can find links to these plans. Alright, so let's build this. Now, according to these cut lists, I have about 123 precise cuts to do. Yay! Oh well. A really good tip when you're cutting with a circle saw is to use an insulation foam underneath the plywood. That way you won't cut in the table below it and you get really nice clean cuts. Now, cutting plywood on a table saw isn't really that hard. However, when you use a circle saw to do the cuts, it's kind of easy to mess it up. So most of the time I do just rough cuts and then I clean them up on the table saw when they are in smaller pieces. When you do a large project like this, you end up with a lot of different pieces, so it's a good idea to mark each and every piece so you know what part you have done and what part you are left to do. And later on when you assemble it, it's like building Lego. It's super easy when you know what part goes where. Nice! All the parts are now done and it's time to assemble the cabinets. I start by building the top frame, and the top frame is put together with some pocket holes and glue. When building things with pocket holes, it's very important that the two parts are tightly clamped together. And if I do not clamp the two pieces, then there's a chance when I screw in the pocket holes that the parts will get misaligned. Now the rest of the assembly is pretty easy. I just line things up, add some glue, and nail it together with some brad nails while the glue dries. And to reinforce the corners a little bit more, add some dowels to them. I also reinforced the corners on the bottom of the cabinet as well with some dowels. But all the reinforcement can also have been done with just normal screws. I just choose dowels because it looks nicer. The next part is the most tricky part of this entire build, and that is to attach this top part to the cabinet. When all is done, I will be able to level this top part as well as adjusting the height a tiny bit by adding some bolts that go through the top part and into the cabinet itself. Now the hard part about this is actually the drilling. But before I can do that, I need to know where to drill. On this cabinet, I intend to have my planer on it. Whew. So my idea here is to put the bolt somewhere here, because, well, the planer is blocking it to have it on the side, and also have some space on the back of it. Now obviously this is different from all the machines and where you can install the bolts, but on some machines you have a really large footprint compared to the machine itself, and so it might actually cover the entire top of the cabinet. Now the best way to fix that would be to increase the length or the width of the cabinet. So I mark out where I want the holes to be, and then I drill straight down through the cabinet top and into the frame below it. Now as you can see, I'm putting the bolts as close to the machine as I possibly can. I have still a big overhang in the back, but there will be nothing on the back here that's pressing down on the top. And that is the reason why this odd placement of the holes. Alright, so the next thing here is to enlarge these holes so that I can fit these threaded inserts into them. These are only 10 millimeters, but they require 12 millimeters for these fairly large threaded inserts. If I try to use a larger drill bit in this hole, this drill bit will start to wander around and create a big mess over here. I would not be able to get the new hole in the center, because this type of drill bit requires to have a fresh hole to drill in. But there's a way to get around with that, and that is to drill a hole in a piece of wood like this and use that as a guide, so you don't have to rely on this tip to guide the drill bit. So I'll take this drill guide, align it directly over the hole I just made, and make sure the old hole is in the center of the new hole. And all I have to do now is just drill in this hole and try to keep it straight down. Now this is how the bottom of the top will look like when the bolts are fully installed. As you can see, I have a washer here and the nut. And to be able to fully lower this down into the cabinet, I need to create a recess for the washer and the nut. I'll use the same technique as I did when I enlarged this hole. I have a guide for a Forstner bit, I clamp it in place and I drill. And finally, I'm going to install these threaded inserts into the holes I just made. Now before I continue, I need to test so that the bolts fit in the threaded insert. If there are any misalignment, I will alter the holes on the top piece slightly. Just drill them a little bit larger in the direction they need to be. But that's about it. Unfortunately, this build requires pretty long, fully threaded bolts, but on the other hand, they are pretty easy to make. The only thing you need is a threaded rod like this, a nut, and some epoxy glue. You cut the rod to the desired length, you end up with something like this. Apply the epoxy glue on the threads on the inside of the nut. Then you take your rod and just screw it on and wait for it to harden. And then you have your bolt. For the drawer fronts, I will glue together some boards of spruce and cut them to size. Now there are situations just like this that made me come to the conclusion to do these machine cabinets. It took longer time to set up the machine and remove the machine than to actually do the planing of the boards, and it shouldn't really be like that. Now to make it easier to glue up all these boards, I cut them to smaller pieces with my miter saw, and then I squared up the edges with my table saw. Next up, I'm gonna add some, I don't know what these are called, wooden chips, something like that, between each of the boards, like that. And that will help me to align the boards when I press them together so they are not in two different levels. Yes! Here I put small marks where I want all my biscuits to be. Then I use my handheld router to make small slots where the biscuit can go in. All the slots are made and it's time to glue. The fastest way I could come up with on how to apply the glue was first of all to clamp all the boards together, apply the glue, smear it all out, and then just insert all the biscuits in all the slots. But that turned out to be a little more tricky than I had planned. Hey, wait a minute. half the boards are supposed to have these. Damn it. I hate it when this happens. Apply it somewhere else. Ah! There we go. So when finally all the biscuits was in place, all I had to do now was clamp all the boards together. And the important part is to add clamps both from the bottom and the top, so that the final boards doesn't get an arc shape. I like to remove as much glue as possible before it gets dry. Yeah, a chisel is good and all that, but a hand planer, way better and way faster. And there's no risks to slip and cut deep into the wood. And to get the final thickness of the drawer fronts, I run into the planer again. I also do it to remove any concave shape I might have gotten from the glue up. Next up, I run them through the table saw so the drawer fronts get their final sizes. Okay, so here's the thing. Do not use these wooden chips. They are really bad for this type of thing. Well, they did a job to align the two pieces, but when I did the cuts, I was extremely lucky not to cut where the wooden chips are. I just did some random cuts and some leftover pieces, and I found this. Yeah, the drawers fronts could have looked like this on the sides, but they do not. But lucky me, ended up with none of those cuts. Oh yeah. Bottom line, do not use this. Just glue them like you normally would. To give the drawer fronts a little bit nicer feel when you touch them, I gave them a chamfer along all the edges. Just a small chamfer, but enough to make them feel really smooth and nice to touch. Oh, by the way, it's the same style on the drawers behind me. To give the spruce a little bit harder finish, I added some kind of water-based lacquer on it. It's really easy to apply and gives a good result. Now when the drawer front is loose, I thought it would be a great idea to do all the drawer handle holes before the drawer fronts were installed. To do that, I just place one of these plastic templates on the drawer front, mark where the holes are gonna be, and then drill out the holes in the drill press. The drawers are assembled in pretty much the same way as the cabinet carcasses. I apply glue and I nail it together with some brad nails while the glue dries. Installing drawer sliders is actually pretty easy when you know how to do it. The first thing I do is to place a spacer at the bottom of the cabinet, and then I place my slider on top of that spacer. I also make sure that the slider is flush with the front of the cabinet. I then make some pilot holes for the screws for the slider and then just screw the slider into place. I always start from the back and work my way to the front of the cabinet. When the first set of drawer sliders is installed, I use another spacer for the next set of drawer sliders. That spacer has the same height as the drawer front minus the height of the slider. And just as the previous row, I start adding screws from the back and work myself to the front. I add a couple of spacers on the bottom of the cabinet so that the drawer will be slightly elevated from the bottom of the cabinet. I insert the drawer, and on the back of the drawer I add something heavy, so that when I pull the drawer out, it will stay parallel to the bottom of the cabinet. When I install the drawer slides to the drawer, I do the opposite from what I did when I installed the slides to the cabinet. I start from the front and work myself to the back. To install the last set of screws, I need to remove the drawer from the cabinet. To install the next drawer, I need a new set of spacers to get the new drawer into the correct height. After that, it's pretty much the same thing as I did on the first drawer. If you like this video and this type of content, you can show it to me by hitting that like button. The way I'm gonna attach the drawer front to the drawer itself is first of all to add a spacer on the back of the drawer. This is so that it won't fully go all the way in. Next, I add some spacers at the bottom of the cabinet so that we get a little bit of space between the cabinet itself and the drawer. I follow up by adding some double adhesive tape to the drawer itself. And then I press the drawer front to that adhesive tape. I pull the drawer front together with the drawer out. I pre-drill some holes from the inside of the drawer, and then I add some screws from the back to fix it in place. To make the drawer handle a little bit easier to screw in place, I enlarge the holes with a drill bit. After that, it's really easy to screw the handle in place. And for the next drawer, I do the same thing I just did on the first drawer. If the drawer for some reason is too large to fit, you can simply just reduce the height of it on a table saw or with a circular saw. Next up, I install the wheels on the bottom of the cabinet. I start off by marking out where I want the wheels to be, and then I pre-drill all the holes and screw the wheels into place. I also make sure to add the wheels with the locks in the front of the cabinet. If you enjoy watching this video just as much as I have making it, then I highly suggest you should subscribe. Why is it so hard? Then I highly suggest you should subscribe to my channel, because then you will get suggested to watch more videos like this. Alright, so it's time to finalize the top of the cabinet. For that, I glue some washers to the top of the cabinet with some epoxy glue. I start off by marking out where I want the washers to be, and then apply the glue. After that, I put in the washers and bolts. And then I make sure the top of the cabinet is aligned perfectly with the bottom part. And then I screw in the bolts until the glue hardens. And after it's fully hardened, I remove the bolts along with the cabinet top. At this moment I thought it would be an excellent time to do the finishing touches on the top part. I added some chamfers to all the sharp edges, and I sanded everything else that I thought would need sanding. And finally I applied 2 coats of the same lacquer I used on the drawer fronts. Here I do the final assembly of the top part. I insert the bolts, flip the top upside down, add washers, and then the nuts. But I do not screw the nuts all the way down. I mix some epoxy glue and apply it on the threads closest to the washer. And then I screw the nuts all the way down as hard as I can by just using my hands. So it's time to screw the machine to the top part of the cabinet. For this, I place the machine on the top part, and then I mark in all the mounting holes the machine has. I remove the machine, and then I drill all the way through the top part and a tiny bit into the frame below it. The top part is now removed, so I get access to the frame below it. I take a spade drill bit and further drill in all the small holes I just made. And this is to make room for all the nuts and bolts that hold the machine into place. And the only thing left with the top part to do is to mount the machine to the top part and then screw the top part to the frame below it. Now obviously the machine bed height will not be in a perfect level with my workbench, but that is what these smart little adjustment bolts are for. You see, I can move each corner up and down just as I want to until the machine bed is at a perfect level with the workbench. I'm almost done with this cabinet. I load it up with drawers, and the level of the cabinet top I locked down with some hot glue between the bolts and the washers. Remember, the washers was glued to the plywood, so it won't move anywhere. And if I need to adjust the machine bed level in the future, the glue on the bolts are really easy to remove. Alright, so that's it for this build. I'm so happy that I never have to lift these stupid machines again. And if you want to see me build more cabinets like this, you can check out this video. Or if you want to be storing your tools on the walls, you can check out this video.